Greetings fencers, this is part 4 of my distance series, and this time we're going to go through close distance. Now this is still within the middle section of fight progression in the German concept of beginning, middle, and end. First we'll cover some ways this distance is entered, then the grappling, and then also look at some sword alternatives. In the Zettel, we see this distance get explained in detail in the Durchlaufen section, or running through. Many fencers will take advantage of when the points are passed and no longer usable. Mark, when one runs into you with the sword, but if he runs into you, then come forth with the wrestling. And we're given some good ways on how to actively close distance, one being the Kron or crown. Whatever comes from him, the crown takes it away. Note, when you cleave in above with the scalper, if he then parries with the hilt high over his head, this parry is called the crown, and with it, he runs into you. The crown has many weaknesses, but used for its purpose, it can be very strong for entering close distance. We also see crown with Meyer, but he also goes even further with a position called Brechfenster, breaking window, essentially using crown from the bind to counter Sprechfenster or long point. We also get another good example of forcing close distance in the Verkehr or reverser section. Reverser forces running through. Also with wrestling, the elbow, knowingly take, spring into his balance. Regardless of what source you use, it's getting solid bind control, then thrusting in a hanging, and as they push your point up or away with their point offline, you can now enter into close distance. Now how close should we get? Well, like everything, there can be many contexts and goals, but an important piece of advice can be found throughout the plays, but not as explicitly as it is stated here in the Hanischfechten wrestling plays. That's the armored Zettel. Mark, that is if you would wrestle, then before all other things, you should know how you rightly should spring to him behind his forward foot. This is also an example from the Zwerchhau section. So lay the short edge to his right side upon the neck, and spring with the right foot behind his left, and back him over you with the sword. When wrestling, we do not want to be reaching. The further something is from us, the weaker it will be. Here you can see with my arm extended, I cannot put up any resistance, and it takes him zero effort to move my arm. Now that my arm is close, it takes all his strength to move it, and I feel almost no pressure on my arm. When entering wrestling, we will often need that deep step or spring, regardless of it being a takedown or not, but there are contexts where it's not essential and your goal is different. And you can be in control of this. When you approach him with wrestling, and he also to you, then see whether he has set one foot forward or has neither forward. Then pull him to you or thrust him from you so he must step. If he then steps forward with the left foot, then spring soon with the right foot behind. Pulling and pushing will make your opponent step to get access to different sides and legs. It will be default in wrestling, but it can be seen when holding a sword as well. So now the main division for distance in your techniques is stated quite clearly in the Durchlaufen section. Mark, the running through and the wrestling are of two kinds with the sword. The running throughs are the body wrestling, and thereafter are the arm wrestlings. The main two divisions in Ringen or wrestling are at the arms and at the body. We see the same division in the standalone Ringen sources of Master Ot Jud. If someone grabs you by the arms, and you do the same, when you come to grips with someone so that you have one arm under his arm and the other arm over his arm, and he has the same grip on you. His teachings are divided by first, wrestling at the arms, because that is what you'll first come in contact with. Then the next plays are all if you have gone past the arms and are holding the torso. For the longsword plays, the main distinction given for wrestling at the body is when he runs into you and drives high up with his arms. When their hands are up and the body is open underneath, then Durchlaufen is advised, and body wrestlings are also shown once either the arms are dealt with or they're pushed sideways and you came beside them. When one runs into you with the sword and holds his hands low. The wrestlings at the sword and arms are advised when they kept their sword lower. And to note, this is where we also see a gradient of distance. The same technique can be applied at different distances and grabbing different areas. This is the distance where many of the sword disarms take place. Techniques are applied at the sword instead of the arms. Now, skill and technique play a big part in the success of wrestling, but weight and strength is another huge factor. Both Master Ott and Fiore de Liberi tell you before wrestling you need to observe if someone is bigger and stronger than you. If someone is bigger than you, there are some other options in the close quarters family that can still be used. The first one that we see in almost every section of the Zettel is the underslice. The two lower slices pertain to driving against the fencers that like to run in. It can be difficult to complete, especially in padded HEMA, but it's given as an option in most sections. We also have different ways of slicing. On the neck and head and arms, whenever you end up in close distance and the center's open, just push that blade there, or double if it's not. So press his sword down with the thwart and lay the short edge behind his arms on his neck. The pommel is also one of the best options. It can be driven to the head on either side as well as in between arms. It's interesting that striking with the pommel is almost never stated in the Bloßfechten Zettel. There are 3 places that I found it, with the Vorschlag, the half-sword play in Ringen, and the Durchlaufen line with the pommel could easily imply that. Striking does get mentioned in the Armored Zettel, but is generally described with hooking in that context. However, many of the German manuscripts outside of the main Zettel sources do show or describe pommel striking. And half-swording is also a great option that increases your strength with the sword in close quarters. Again, this is mostly found in the Armored Zettel, and other manuscripts are filled with it, but the Standard Zettel only has it pop up once or twice. And the thwart cut is often an option in close distance. It may not cut well, but it would certainly hurt. And Meyer gives a specific application of a thwart called the wrist cut, Nichelhau. So this has been a look at some of the advice and options for close distance. We see distances where it's safe to grab the blade, then the arms, and then the body, along with striking options in those distances. A saying I've heard is, you're only as good as your weakest distance. Be sure to practice options so you're never overwhelmed by someone good at closing. And going to other martial arts clubs like wrestling, BJJ, MMA, judo, etc. will be a big help to your HEMA training, as well as practicing Ott's wrestling or Fiore's wrestling and dagger and long knife systems. The next episode will be on the end of fencing, meaning withdraw or Abzug. And the very last episode will be a video of all our drills that we do to practice distance management. Thanks for watching, keep studying, keep practicing.
Oh man, nice. That was amazing. Completely helpless. You could have ripped my arm off.
I finally got Fiore's first play.